Daniel had been waiting for this moment all day, though he didn't realize it. After a long, exhausting day at work, he finally stepped out of his car, feeling the familiar weight of fatigue settle into his shoulders. The sun had already dipped behind the horizon, and the soft glow of streetlights painted the quiet neighborhood in warm shades of yellow. The air smelled of autumn leaves and damp earth, a subtle reminder that the seasons were changing. He had been looking forward to this quiet evening at home, thinking about nothing more than a warm shower and a simple meal before sinking into the comfort of his bed. As he walked up the path to his front door, a strange sense of unease tickled the back of his mind. At first, he tried to shake it off, blaming it on fatigue or maybe a trick of his imagination, but as he inserted his key and turned the lock, he noticed something unusual. The door, which he was certain he had locked that morning, was slightly ajar. He froze, holding the keys in his hand, staring at the small gap through which a faint light leaked. His heart skipped a beat. "Maybe I forgot to lock it," he muttered to himself, though the idea felt incomplete, unsatisfying. He pushed the door open slowly, trying not to make a sound. The house was quiet, almost eerily so. Not a single creak or groan came from the old wooden floors, and no sound of movement reached him from the rooms beyond. Everything seemed normal at first glance, yet something deep in his chest told him that it wasn't. He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. The familiar scent of his home-clean laundry, a faint hint of coffee, and the faint musk of the old carpet was there, but underneath it was something else. Something unfamiliar, almost sweet, like the smell of burning sage mixed with wildflowers. Daniel wrinkled his nose. "That's strange," he whispered. He moved cautiously toward the hallway, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. As he approached his bedroom, his mind raced. There was nothing in his life that could have prepared him for what he saw next. There, sitting on his bed, was a woman. She was tall, her posture straight and calm, and she wore traditional Apache clothing, beautifully adorned, with intricate patterns and delicate beadwork. Her dark hair fell gracefully over her shoulders, and her eyes, deep and striking, seemed to pierce right through him. She was not moving, not making a sound. Yet Daniel could feel the intensity of her presence, as though the room itself had shifted to accommodate her. Daniel's first instinct was panic. His mouth went dry, and his heart pounded against his ribcage like a drum. "Who? What?" he stammered, stepping back instinctively. He wanted to call the authorities, wanted to shout, wanted to demand answers. But something in her calm demeanor froze him in place. She did not appear threatening. She did not appear aggressive. She simply looked at him with an unspoken understanding, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Don't be afraid," she said, her voice soft but commanding, carrying a melody that made Daniel pause. It was not just words. It was the way she spoke, the rhythm, the certainty. "I am Nokomis. I mean no harm. I am here because I must be." Daniel blinked, unsure if he was dreaming or if his exhaustion had finally caught up with him. His mind raced with questions. How did you get in here?" he finally asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Who sent you?" Nokomis tilted her head slightly, a quiet smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I came to you because it is time. There are things you need to see, things you need to understand. I cannot explain everything yet, but you will know in time. I am part of your life in ways you do not yet see." He shook his head, trying to clear the fog of disbelief. "This isn't real," he muttered. "I must be dreaming. I just need to wake up." But no matter how he pinched himself or rubbed his eyes, she remained. Solid, present, and undeniably real. Daniel's fear slowly began to mingle with curiosity. Something about her presence was strange but compelling. He could feel it deep inside him, a pull, subtle at first, but growing stronger with every heartbeat. Despite his initial panic, he found himself sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. He looked at her more closely. Her eyes were unlike any he had ever seen, a combination of wisdom and serenity, sorrow and strength. There was a story in them, one that was waiting to be told. And Daniel knew, somehow, that it was not safe or wise to interrupt it. I don't understand, he admitted finally, his voice trembling. Why me? Why here? Nokomis's gaze softened. Because you are ready. Because the path you walk is connected to mine. There are threads you cannot yet see. But they have been woven together long before this night. Daniel swallowed hard. His rational mind screamed at him to stand up, to run, to call someone, anyone, but a deeper part of him, the part that had always felt untethered, that had always longed for meaning beyond the mundane, wanted to listen. And so, he stayed. For the next few hours, they sat in silence, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Daniel's mind raced, trying to reconcile the impossibility of the situation with the calm certainty of her presence. He thought about his life, about his routines, his habits, and how he had always felt that something important was missing, though he never knew what it was. And now, here she was, an Apache woman, inexplicably in his home, with the promise of revelations he could not yet understand. Gradually, Daniel found himself asking questions, more cautiously at first, then with growing curiosity. Nokomis answered patiently, never rushing, never forcing. She spoke of her people, of the struggles they had faced, of the wisdom carried through generations, and of the connection she had discovered between her lineage and his family. Daniel listened, fascinated despite the lingering disbelief. Every word seemed to open a new door in his mind, revealing a history he had never known. A story intertwined with his own life, in ways that were at once baffling and profound. Hours passed, but Daniel lost track of time. The night outside his window deepened, the world hushed around his small home. And yet, inside his bedroom, a different kind of world unfolded. A world of stories, of connections, of history, and destiny. Every question he asked, every detail he learned, felt like a puzzle piece snapping into place, revealing a bigger picture he had never imagined. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the sky, Daniel was no longer the same man who had walked through his front door just hours earlier. The fear and disbelief had not disappeared completely, but they had transformed into something else, a profound curiosity, a sense of wonder, and the beginnings of understanding that his life, and the world around him, were far more intricate and interconnected than he had ever realized. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the quiet streets, Daniel looked at Nokomis, sitting calmly on the bed. He realized, with a mixture of awe and humility, that this night would change everything, not in ways he could yet measure, but in ways that would ripple through his life for years to come. And though he did not yet fully understand why she was there, or what was coming, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: his life would never be the same again. And so, with a heart still pounding and a mind racing with questions, Daniel took the first step into a new reality. One where the impossible was suddenly possible, where the unknown held lessons he could not yet comprehend, and where a stranger, calm and wise, had become the catalyst for a transformation he never anticipated. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, his hands gripping the edge tightly as his mind tried to process everything that had just happened. Nokomis remained calm, sitting with perfect stillness, her dark eyes fixed on him, as if she could see every question before he even asked it. The room was quiet, except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. The silence was different from the empty silence of the house. It was alive with expectation, as though something important was about to unfold. After a moment that felt both long and short, Daniel finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Why are you here? Why me? Nokomis looked at him for a long moment, her gaze steady and gentle. Because your life is connected to mine in ways you do not yet understand, she said softly. There are stories in your family that have been forgotten, stories that were never told. My people have carried a part of those stories with us for generations. You have lived your life unaware. But tonight, that changes. Daniel swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I don't understand," he admitted. "My family. I don't know anything about Apache people or stories or what you're saying. I just don't get it." Nokomis smiled, a small, patient smile. "It is not surprising. These things are hidden, passed in whispers, carried in memory. You are only now ready to see them. You are only now ready to hear what has been waiting for you." Daniel's mind raced. He wanted to ask more, to demand details, to understand how this was even possible, but he felt something inside him, a quiet urging to listen, to absorb what she would say without interruption. Slowly, he leaned back against the headboard, taking a deep breath, and allowed himself to focus entirely on her. Nokomis began to speak. She told him about her lineage, her ancestors, and the struggles they had faced over the centuries. She spoke of battles fought, of lands lost and regained, of traditions that had survived despite every attempt to erase them. Daniel listened, fascinated, though he barely understood half of what she said. Still, there was a truth in her voice, a weight in her words, that made him feel connected to something far greater than his own life. "Your grandfather," she said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "He was part of these stories. He walked paths that connected our families long before you were born. You carry his blood, his memories, even if you do not remember. That is why I am here." Daniel's mind flashed back to his grandfather, a quiet man who had told strange tales of the land, of spirits and ancestors, of places Daniel had never visited. At the time, he had dismissed them as old stories, fanciful tales for children. Now, he realized there had been truth woven into those words, truths he had ignored. "But how is this possible?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How are we connected? I don't understand any of this." Nokomis's eyes softened. "Some things cannot be explained in words alone. You will understand in time. Tonight, all you need to do is listen and open your heart. The answers will come, piece by piece." Daniel nodded slowly, though he felt a knot of tension in his chest. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what she might reveal. But a part of him, the part that had always longed for meaning, for a connection to something larger, was eager to know. And so, the night unfolded. Nokomis told him stories of her people, stories filled with bravery, wisdom, and sorrow. She spoke of the land, of rivers and mountains, of the spirits that moved through the world unseen. She told Daniel about ceremonies that honored ancestors, about songs and dances that carried memories across generations. With each word, Daniel felt a strange sense of recognition, as if he had known some of these things all along, buried deep inside him. As she spoke, Daniel's fear began to fade, replaced by curiosity and wonder. He asked questions, and Nokomis answered patiently, never rushing, never judging. They talked about life, about loss, about the choices people make, and the paths those choices create. Daniel felt himself opening in ways he had never experienced before, sharing thoughts and feelings he had kept hidden, even from himself. Hours passed, though Daniel lost track of time. The night outside remained dark, the streetlights casting a soft glow through the window. The world outside seemed distant and unimportant compared to the quiet intimacy of the room and the presence of Nokomis. Every story she told, every memory she shared, felt like a key unlocking parts of his own history, parts he had forgotten or never known. At one point, she reached out and touched his hand lightly. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a profound meaning. "You are not alone," she said softly. "Even when you feel lost, even when the world seems empty, you are connected to something greater. You are part of a story that began long before you, a story that continues through you." Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. He realized that for most of his life, he had felt disconnected, as if he were drifting without purpose. But now, with her words, he felt a spark of understanding. His life, his family, his choices, they were all part of something larger. And for the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he could find his place in it. As the night deepened, Nokomis told him about visions she had seen, visions of events in his past that he barely remembered, moments that had seemed insignificant at the time but were now revealed to have hidden meaning. She spoke of his grandfather again, of the sacrifices he had made, and of the lessons he had tried to pass down. Lessons Daniel had overlooked. Daniel listened, captivated, as she spoke. He realized that his life had been shaped in ways he had never understood, and that the people he had loved, the experiences he had lived, were all connected to a larger story he was only beginning to see. It was overwhelming, but not frightening. Somehow, the weight of it was comforting, as if understanding the story of his past could help guide his future. At one point, he closed his eyes and allowed himself to imagine the scenes she described his grandfather walking through the forests. The Apache people moving across the land. Ceremonies and celebrations, struggles and victories. He could see it all in his mind, and he felt a strange sense of belonging. It was as if, through her stories, he had been given a window into a world he had never known, but had always been a part of. By the early hours of the morning, the fear and confusion that had gripped him when he first saw her had completely vanished. In their place was a quiet awe, a sense of reverence for the story she carried and the wisdom she shared. Daniel realized that he had been given a gift, a night of insight, of connection, and of awakening. As the first hints of dawn began to appear, Nokomis stood and stretched slightly. "It is time for you to rest," she said. "What you have learned tonight will stay with you. More will come, but for now, let it settle in your heart. Trust what you have felt. Trust what you have seen." Daniel nodded, feeling both reluctant and grateful. He wanted to ask more, to hear more, but he sensed that she was right. The night had given him enough to ponder, enough to begin understanding the threads of his life that had previously been hidden. As he lay back on the bed, exhaustion from the emotional intensity of the night finally catching up with him, he looked at Nokomis one last time. She smiled and then slowly, almost imperceptibly, faded into the dim light of the room. It was not as though she had disappeared. Rather, she seemed to exist in a place between reality and memory, leaving him with the profound sense that she had been there for a reason that he would only fully understand in time. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the night linger in his heart. He could still see her face, hear her voice, and feel the weight of her presence. And though sleep finally claimed him, he knew that his life had changed forever. For the first time, he understood that some nights are meant to open doors, to reveal truths, and to awaken parts of ourselves we have long ignored. And this night, this impossible, unforgettable night, was one of those nights. As he drifted into sleep, Daniel dreamed of rivers, forests, and ancestors long gone. He dreamed of stories waiting to be discovered, of connections waiting to be understood, and deep within him, he felt a quiet certainty that life, from this night forward, would never be the same again. In the days after that extraordinary night, Daniel felt as if he had been awakened from a long sleep. The world around him seemed sharper, more vibrant, and yet also filled with subtle mysteries he had never noticed before. The smell of rain on the pavement, the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, even the soft hum of the refrigerator in his kitchen. All of it felt alive, charged with meaning. It was as if the night with Nokomis had unlocked a part of him that had always been dormant, a part that was now wide awake and searching for understanding. At first, Daniel tried to go about his life as usual. He went to work, answered emails, and performed his daily routines. But something had shifted within him. He noticed things he had ignored before. The gentle smile of a stranger, the way the sunlight played on the edge of a building, the quiet way his cat followed him from room to room. Life felt more connected, as if every moment was part of a larger story, a story he had only just begun to read. He also began to think constantly about what Nokomis had told him. Her stories of her people, the struggles of generations, and the connections to his own family weighed on his mind like a puzzle he had to solve. He remembered her words about his grandfather, and suddenly, memories he had long buried started to surface. He remembered small things his grandfather had said in passing, lessons he had ignored as a child, and strange coincidences that he had dismissed as mere chance. Now, they seemed important, like pieces of a larger picture he was just beginning to understand. Curiosity grew into action. Daniel began researching the Apache people and their traditions. He visited libraries, read books, and explored online resources, trying to piece together the history and culture Nokomis had described. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he had known. The depth of their traditions, the resilience of their people, and the wisdom passed through generations amazed him. And yet, he also noticed threads that connected these stories to his own family, to the small town he had grown up in, to the old stories his grandfather had told him long ago. He began to see patterns everywhere. A place he had visited as a child, a family heirloom tucked away in a drawer, a photograph he had almost thrown away. All of it seemed to resonate with something Nokomis had shared. It was as if his life had been quietly guiding him toward understanding. And the night she appeared had simply accelerated the process. Daniel also found himself reflecting on his own choices. He thought about his career, his friendships, his relationships, and even his daily habits. For the first time, he questioned why he did the things he did, and whether those actions were truly aligned with who he wanted to be. He began keeping a journal, writing down his thoughts, his memories, and the insights he was discovering. The process was both challenging and liberating. It forced him to confront truths he had long avoided, but it also gave him a sense of clarity he had never experienced before. Nokomis continued to appear in his life, though in more subtle ways. Sometimes it was a fleeting vision in a dream, other times it was a sudden feeling of presence, as if she were silently guiding him. Her appearances were always gentle, never intrusive, and they often left Daniel with a sense of calm and direction. Through these moments, he began to understand that her role in his life was not just to reveal history or culture. It was to help him awaken to a greater sense of purpose, to see the threads of connection that ran through his life and the world around him. One afternoon, Daniel visited an old part of town he had never paid much attention to. He wandered through quiet streets, noticing the architecture, the layout of the land, and the history embedded in the walls of old buildings. He stumbled upon a small museum dedicated to Native American history and decided to go inside. As he walked through the exhibits, he felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if he had been there before in another time. The artifacts, the photographs, and the stories on display seemed to speak directly to him, reinforcing the lessons Nokomis had shared. That evening, he sat by his window, reflecting on the events of the past week. He thought about how drastically his perspective had changed. The fear and disbelief that had gripped him on the night Nokomis appeared were long gone, replaced by a sense of curiosity, humility, and responsibility. He realized that he could no longer ignore the lessons of the past or the connections that had shaped his life. They demanded attention, understanding, and action. Daniel also began reaching out to people he had lost touch with, family members, old friends, even acquaintances from years ago. He found that conversations took on a deeper meaning now, that he listened more, understood more, and shared more of himself. He discovered that his own journey was not just about understanding Nokomis or the Apache stories, but about connecting with the people around him, mending broken relationships, and fostering a sense of community he had long neglected. One night, he dreamt of Nokomis again. She was standing in a field, surrounded by mountains and rivers, the wind carrying the sounds of drums and songs. She beckoned him forward, and as he stepped into the dream, he felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced. He realized that the night she first appeared in his bedroom had been more than an encounter. It had been an invitation to awaken, to see, to understand, and to live fully. Over the following weeks, Daniel's life continued to change. He found himself more patient, more empathetic, and more attuned to the subtleties of the world around him. He began practicing mindfulness, meditating on the lessons he had learned, and incorporating small rituals that connected him to the stories and traditions Nokomis had shared. He cooked meals with care, tended to his home and garden, and found joy in simple, everyday actions that he had previously overlooked. Even at work, his perspective shifted. He listened more attentively to colleagues, approached challenges with calmness, and found creative solutions where before he had seen only obstacles. People noticed the change in him, though they could not explain it. Daniel realized that transformation often began quietly, within the mind and heart, before manifesting in outward actions. As he continued exploring his family history, Daniel uncovered surprising details. He found letters and photographs tucked away in boxes, documents that revealed the connections Nokomis had spoken of. He discovered that his grandfather had indeed interacted with Native American communities, that he had preserved stories and artifacts, and that he had left subtle clues for Daniel to find. The realization was overwhelming. He felt a deep respect for the generations that had come before him, and a responsibility to honor their legacy by living consciously and with purpose. Through all of this, Daniel's bond with Nokomis remained a guiding force. Though she no longer appeared physically in his home, her presence was felt in the quiet moments when he paused to listen to the wind, when he noticed the intricate patterns of life around him, and when he made choices that reflected a deeper understanding of himself and the world. He realized that her role was not to control or dictate, but to awaken him, to help him see the unseen threads connecting all lives, and to inspire him to live fully and authentically. One evening, as Daniel sat by the fireplace, he reflected on the journey so far. He thought about the fear and confusion he had felt on that first night, the awe and wonder of the hours he had spent listening to Nokomis, and the subtle but profound changes that had followed. He realized that transformation was not a single event but a continuous process, a series of small awakenings that built upon one another. And he understood, with clarity, that his life had been irrevocably changed not by chance, but by the convergence of history, culture, and the mysterious guidance of a woman who had appeared when he was ready to see. By the end of Part 3, Daniel had begun to embrace his new life. He was more connected to his past, more aware of the present, and more prepared for the future. The lessons of the night with Nokomis had taken root, and though he did not yet understand all the ways they would shape him, he felt confident that he was on the right path. His life had transformed from one of routine and distraction to one of meaning and purpose, and he knew that the journey was only beginning. He was ready to continue exploring, learning, and growing, and though Nokomis's physical presence had faded, her influence remained, guiding him toward a life filled with awareness, compassion, and connection, a life that honored the past while embracing the possibilities of the future. After weeks of reflection, exploration, and subtle guidance from Nokomis, Daniel felt a shift within himself that he could not ignore. He had begun to see the world differently, with new awareness and purpose. The small details of life, once unnoticed, now carried meaning. A bird landing on his windowsill, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the soft hum of conversation in the streets, all seemed to whisper of the connections that bound everything together. The night Nokomis had appeared was no longer just a memory. It had become the turning point of his life, the start of a journey he could never have imagined. Daniel began to act on the lessons he had learned. He reached out to estranged family members, people he had neglected or misunderstood in the past. The conversations were not always easy. Some were filled with tension and awkwardness, while others brought tears and long overdue apologies. But Daniel persisted. He realized that healing required courage, honesty, and a willingness to listen. And slowly, connections that had been broken began to mend, as though the threads of family and friendship were being rewoven into something stronger and more resilient. His perspective on his community also began to shift. He started volunteering at local centers, offering his time and energy to causes that mattered. He found fulfillment in helping others, in understanding their struggles and joys, and in contributing to the world in a tangible way. He discovered that true change began not only within himself but also through the impact he could have on others. Every act of kindness, every moment of attention and care, became a reflection of the lessons Nokomis had imparted, the understanding that life is deeply interconnected and that each person's actions ripple outward in ways often unseen. Daniel's connection to his family's history deepened further. He spent hours examining old photographs, letters, and artifacts left by his grandfather. Each discovery revealed stories he had never known, events that shaped not only his family but also the communities around them. He began documenting these stories, writing them down to preserve them for future generations. In doing so, he felt a profound sense of responsibility, a duty to honor the past while learning from it. He realized that understanding history was not just an intellectual pursuit. It was a way to connect, to remember, and to grow. Dreams continued to play a significant role in his life. On several nights, Nokomis appeared to him in dreams, guiding him gently, showing him visions of rivers, forests, and people from both his and her lineage. Each dream carried lessons and insights, helping him navigate challenges and decisions in his waking life. Sometimes the visions were subtle, like a feeling or a sense of knowing. Other times, they were vivid, as if he were witnessing history firsthand. Daniel learned to trust these dreams, understanding that they were not mere imagination but a form of guidance rooted in the wisdom Nokomis had shared. One evening, Daniel sat quietly in his living room, the soft glow of lamplight filling the space. He reflected on how far he had come since that first night when he had returned home to find Nokomis in his bedroom. He thought about the fear he had felt, the confusion, and the disbelief. And now, he realized that fear and uncertainty were natural steps on the path to understanding. They had been necessary for growth, pushing him to confront the unknown and embrace change. As he pondered these thoughts, he understood that Nokomis's presence in his life had been about more than revealing his family history or introducing him to a culture he had never known. It had been about awakening him to a life of purpose, connection, and awareness. He saw clearly that her role was not to lead him but to help him see, to help him open his heart and mind to the richness of life, and to inspire him to live fully. Daniel also found himself becoming more mindful of everyday moments. He practiced patience and attentiveness in ways he never had before. He noticed the way sunlight filtered through the trees, how raindrops glistened on windows, the gentle sway of grass in the wind. Even ordinary conversations carried new depth as he listened more fully and responded with thoughtfulness and care. Life, he realized, was not about rushing or accumulating, but about being present and aware, about honoring each moment and the connections it contained. His friendships flourished as well. Daniel found himself forming deeper, more meaningful relationships with people he had known for years. He listened with empathy, offered support without judgment, and shared his own experiences honestly. The bonds grew stronger, built not on convenience or superficiality, but on mutual respect, understanding, and trust. Through these relationships, he discovered the joy of human connection in its truest form, the kind of connection that Nokomis had taught him to recognize, value, and nurture. One day, while visiting a local park, Daniel noticed a small ceremony taking place nearby. Curious, he approached and found a group of people honoring their ancestors through song, dance, and ritual. The scene reminded him of Nokomis's stories, and he felt a deep resonance within himself. Watching the ceremony, he understood that the wisdom of the past could be honored and preserved in many ways, and that participation in such traditions brought a sense of grounding and belonging. He felt gratitude for having been shown these perspectives, and a desire to carry them forward in his own life. Daniel also reflected on his own personal growth. He realized that he had become more compassionate, patient, and resilient. The lessons of connection, history, and awareness had helped him confront fears he had previously avoided, and they had given him the courage to pursue a life aligned with his values. He understood that transformation was not about grand gestures or sudden change, but about consistent, intentional actions, and the willingness to embrace the lessons life presented. Though Nokomis no longer appeared in his physical world, her influence remained. Daniel often felt her presence in quiet, subtle ways, the sense of guidance in a decision, the feeling of support in a moment of uncertainty, the awareness of interconnectedness in everyday life. It was as if her wisdom had become a part of him, woven into his thoughts, actions, and perceptions. He realized that true guidance does not always arrive in person. Sometimes, it arrives through insight, intuition, and understanding that emerges from within. Over time, Daniel's life began to take on new meaning and purpose. He pursued projects that mattered to him, connected more deeply with his community, and nurtured his relationships with family and friends. He learned to honor his own experiences and the experiences of others, recognizing that each life carries stories, struggles, and wisdom that deserve respect. The lessons Nokomis had shared had become tools for living a more conscious, aware, and compassionate life. One quiet evening, Daniel sat by his window, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, and he felt a deep sense of peace. He reflected on the incredible journey he had been on, the fear, the wonder, the learning, and the transformation. He understood now that life is filled with unexpected encounters, moments that change everything if one is open to seeing them. And he realized that the night Nokomis had appeared in his bedroom had been one of those moments, a turning point that had awakened him to a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. Daniel smiled to himself, feeling gratitude for the lessons, the memories, and the connections that had emerged. He knew that life would continue to unfold with challenges, surprises, and opportunities for growth, but he also knew that he was better equipped to face them with awareness, empathy, and the wisdom that had been awakened within him. He had learned to trust the journey, to embrace the unknown, and to honor the connections that make life meaningful. And though Nokomis had disappeared as mysteriously as she had arrived, her influence remained eternal in his heart. Daniel understood that some encounters are not about the physical presence, but about the awakening they inspire, the lessons they teach, and the transformation they catalyze. He knew that he would carry her guidance with him always, as he continued to live a life of purpose, connection, and awareness. That night, Daniel lay in bed, reflecting on the incredible changes in his life. He felt a profound sense of clarity and acceptance. He understood that life is full of unseen threads, guiding us in ways we may not always understand, and that opening one's heart and mind to these moments can lead to transformation beyond imagination. The night Nokomis appeared had been more than a beginning, it had been a doorway, one that would continue to influence his life for years to come. As he closed his eyes and drifted into sleep, Daniel felt a quiet certainty. Life had changed, yes, but he had changed with it. The fear, the confusion, and the doubt had been replaced with awareness, understanding, and purpose. He knew now that every moment mattered, every choice carried weight, and every connection was significant. And in this understanding, he found peace, a peace that was not passive, but alive, vibrant, and enduring. Daniel realized that his life was now a journey of continuous discovery, learning, and connection. He would continue to honor the past, live consciously in the present, and embrace the future with openness and courage. And though Nokomis had left, she had given him the greatest gift anyone could receive: the awakening of his own heart and the vision to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, the sacred in the everyday, and the profound beauty in the connections that weave all lives together.